Welcome to The Record Show, your virtual spin around the vinyl industry. Brought to you by Radio Wasteland Records. Yes, Midland has a record store. Here's your host, Jim Gleason.
Well, greetings from the Wasteland, and welcome to another edition of The Record Show. We've got a fun one headed your way today. I'll run down the highlights of this week's new releases, all of the goodies headed to an independent record store near you this coming Friday, and we'll have an educational spin from the Wasteland, 1970s style. But first, I'd like to welcome to The Record Show a rock and roll legend here in Michigan and lots of points beyond, and quite frankly, a jazz legend nowadays as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Robert Lee Balderrama, Bobby Balderrama from the Mysterians fame. Bobby, how are you this morning?
Thank you, Jim, for having me on the show too.
Well, it's great to have you on. I love talking with Michigan artists, and especially those of you who were really around at the forefront of that Michigan music scene early in the from the late 1960s into the early 1970s. And you were in a band that really, really made a mark, question mark, and the Mysterians, no pun intended there. Can you tell me a little bit about how that got started? Because originally I'd read it was just really a three-piece with you guys playing surf music.
Yeah, it was me and my nephew. We used to jam together, and I would go over to his house and practice. He'd come over to my house. We just practice. We were just jamming, basically. Nothing really serious. And then my sister, I was over at his house, which is my sister's house. He's my nephew. We were jamming, and she said, "You guys should start a band. You need a drummer." And then we went over his house. I went over his house again, and we practiced. And then Robert Martinez showed up, and his cousin, and I never met him before. And they had a set of congas. So I asked him. I said, "Can you get a set of drums?" And he said, "Yeah, my brother-in-law's got a set." So we started practicing over my parents' farm in Auburn, Michigan, in the garage. We were definitely a garage band. We would practice, there, and we learned like the Ventures, Walk Don't Run, and all kinds of great instrumentals that were really popular then. And then the Rolling Stones. I was like 12 years old when we did that. I was kind of like the leader because I would pick out. I was a guitar player, so I would pick out all these great instrumentals, and I was just starting to learn how to play. I could play melody lines. I couldn't play blues, nothing like that. So we did our first gig, and somebody asked, "So who sings in a band?" I go, "Oh, shoot, here we go." I said, "No, we don't sing. We just play instrumentals." And they said, "Well, you got to have a singer." So I was talking to Robert and my nephew Larry, and I said, "We got to get a singer, And so Robert said, "Well, my brother sings, And I said, "If you could bring him over, we'll try him out, And so he brought him over, and we did Satisfaction. I think we learned that. We tried it, and he sounded like Mick Jagger. And I said, "Wow, this guy's really good." And he danced. I mean, he was a better dancer than Mick Jagger. This guy would definitely attract, people watching him on stage, being up front. So we hired him, and it was question mark, but his name is Rudy Martinez. And then we had a manager that saw us, and he really liked the band. And he gave us all a letter. I was X, and Larry was Z, and Robert was Y. And he gave question mark. And he said, we asked him, "Why did you give him question mark?" He said, "Because you guys are the Mysterians, I want you guys to be mysterious, so he's going to be the most mysterious guy in the band. But don't tell anybody you guys' names, And so we started playing out, for DJs, for Dick Fabian and Bob Dyer and Bob Dell and WKC and WKNX. We were doing these teen dances, and we started meeting, people, and I was like 13 or 14. I was starting to look at girls, and they would ask me, "Well, what's your name?" And I would say X. And they looked at me like I was weird,
It was that group that then got together, that grouping of you guys that came up with the song that did it for you and put you on the map. Tell me a little bit about that and what that ride was like after 96 Tears hit.
Yeah, after the next year's Thursday, it went #1 across all our, the local area in mid-Michigan, Tri-City area and Flint. And then went down to Detroit and it got picked up. It did really good in Detroit. It was went #1 in Detroit and it got picked up by Cameo Parkway. And before I know it, we were flying to do American Bandstand with Dick Clark. I mean, everything kind of happened real fast. But it just and Detroit is what started it. I mean, not started, but that's where a major city where it took off. And Cameo Parkway picked it up, and then and we were doing all the TV shows, and all of a sudden we were on tour with all these major bands and stuff. We Mamas and Papas, the Four Seasons, Sonny and Cher, we toured with them, the Beach Boys, uh, the Yardbirds, we toured with them when Jimmy Page was playing in the band. I was hoping that Jeff Beck was going to be with them, but
Really kind of a rocket ship ride for you at that point in time.
it was. It happened so fast, I mean, I was in the ninth grade when all this going on, and everybody kept saying, "Well, you going to go to school?" I go, "Yeah." So me and Frank, keyboard player, he was younger than me, so we signed up for correspondence, and we couldn't even stick to that because we were so busy.
Now, you mentioned some of these other rockers, and again, I really like to point back to Michigan being a really great place for music in the late 1960s from the other bands like the MC5 and Iggy and the Stooges, Bob Seger starting off from them. What was it like for you to be in that type of atmosphere, especially at such a young age?
Well, I always looked up to all these artists, so I was kind of like the audience, I knew I had to go on stage and play, but I would go out in front or to the side of the stage and watch them perform, and it's just like, wow, they're really here. It's not the radio I'm listening to; it's they're really here, And so I was just a kid, and so I was still in awe, just by all these performers.
So as the band went on, how did you guys handle moving on from that first album with Cameo Parkway to the subsequent records? And where did things take you from there?
Well, what happened was we we went on tour a lot. We toured with a lot of different bands, and then we recorded our second album, and that did pretty good. But I would say after our second album, about half a year later, 6 months, 8 months later, everything started going downhill, and uh, so I decided, we worked on our third album in LA. We was there for, I don't know, 6 to 8 weeks there recording. We'd play some places with them, and then we played on the Sunset Boulevard. But then, I realized that we weren't at the top no more. And so when we got back home, I decided it's time for me to go back to school and get a career. And I took up electronics, and I became an electronic engineer. I went to Houston and worked with oil companies, and I worked at Bay Music for Ed Currit, and I worked at Mid Michigan Music for Rick Allen doing the repairs. But jazz has always been my favorite. When I was a little kid, I used to listen to Wes Montgomery and Cal Farlow and all these great jazz guitarists, but it was over my head. I could play instrumentals, and I learned how to play blues after watching Dick Wagner one time, and saw him playing blues, and so I got into the blues, but jazz was always my favorite. And then when George Benson came out in the '70s, he came out with Breeze, and then I was like, wow, that is beautiful. And it wasn't really jazzy; it was more smooth. They called it smooth jazz, where it was pleasant to listen to and like listen to a beautiful song.
And that's really where things are headed now. I mean, you formed then at one point the Robert Lee Review
Yeah.
and really made a mark for yourself in, as you called that, smooth jazz genre.
Yeah, I do. People say, well, you're a jazz guitarist. I say, well, I understand jazz, but smooth jazz is my favorite, like George Benson. He can play jazz. I can play jazz, but smooth jazz is a market for it. And there's radio stations all over the country, terrestrial and internet, that play smooth jazz only. So that's where I wanted to lock into, getting played on the radio. So, the Mysterians, I put the Mysterians back together for a little bit, and we started playing dance music, but I kept I kept it going. The Robert Lee Review, smooth jazz, and we did a lot of events. We played for Magic Johnson in at the Horizon Center in Saginaw, and it was just great.
See, and this is what leads us to something brand new that you're involved with. That's actually
Yeah,
really, really exciting. It's kind of the next step for Robert Lee Balderrama, isn't it?
it is, Jim. It was about 6 years ago, I think 2015 or 16, something like that. I released a song called Happy and Go Lucky, and then Chad Cunningham from Prime Brothers, really a nice guy and a great friend. He promoted me and he hooked me up with a guy in New York. His name is Gary Lekowitz, and he promotes music on the radio for Sony Records, and he contacts all the radio stations and he gets their songs played on the radio. But he also has his own label, which is Generic Records and Orchard Records, is his labels, and it's distributed by Sony. And uh, he got a hold of me. Let me see, about 4 months ago, because we became good friends after he promoted Happy Go Lucky, and Happy Go Lucky went number 27 across the nation on all the smooth jazz shows. So it kind of after Happy and Go Lucky, and I was hoping to go on tour and stuff, but nothing ever happened. So I kind of just fell to the side and still playing smooth jazz locally, and doing the Mysterians, playing the club scene. And then Gary got a hold of me about 4 months ago, and he had an idea for a song. He asked me if I was still playing smooth jazz, and I go, yeah, I will always play it. And he says, can you help me write it? And I go, yeah. So he's a singer, so he sang about 4 or 5 notes, and I took those notes and I put it together, and I had Frank Rodriguez, the original keyboard player for Question Mark Mysterians, me and him still play together, and we got together, we wrote this song, and I sent it to Gary, and I didn't know what he was going to do with that. Basically, it looked at as that was his song, but we helped write it. And so he kept telling me that he's working on it, and finally he sent it to me, and was like, I was blown away how he took that song that me and him and Frank wrote, and he just made it amazing. I mean, there's my guitar licks were still in there, but he threw a horn in there, and the horn is just amazing. The sound, and the quality. And you got to listen to the sound. It's gonna be on. It's gonna be released this Friday. Uh, and like I said, it's gonna be on 96.9. The Oasis. It's out of Palm Springs, California. They're going to feature the song around 10:30 Eastern time. Oh, and the song is called Any Moment. And it's got a voice in there, but the voice just comes in real quick and leaves out. And you listen to the instrumental, you hear my guitar playing, and you hear the trumpet playing. And it's just amazing, Jim, when I heard that song. And Gary told me that he had sent it out to a couple of syndicated smooth jazz DJs that play. They have programs that play across the country, and they really liked the song, and they predicted it could hit the top 10.
That is great.
I was so excited to hear that.
So it'll premiere this week on the
Yeah,
radio show, which folks can listen to online.
yeah, and I have it on Facebook on my page. It shows the 96.9 website, and there's a picture of me of the Any Moment, and then you can click on it. There's a blue URL. You just hover on top and click on it, and it'll take you right to the radio station. Then you click on to listen to the music, on there, and then they'll start playing it. And he's going to feature our song. It's Dale Berg is the programmer director there.
We'll make sure to put a link in our description below for those that watch this program on YouTube.
Thank you. I also wanted to mention something else too. We did a concert last week for the homeless, and I put it together because I really believe the homeless should have shelter. I don't, when we see people with signs that, a lot of people say, well, they just want it for drugs, whatever. But to me, the homeless people should be allowed, or should have, shelter. It's so sad to see them sleeping on park benches and on the ground. I don't think a human being, has to do. This is the United States. We should take care of our homeless. and put them in a place like a community of like these mini homes where they could all live together and learn how to rise again, to a level of being, like a working citizen or something.
Again, just absolutely admirable work that you do.
Thank you, Jim.
We've been talking with Robert Lee Balderrama from Question Mark and the Mysterians and the Robert Lee Review, and some brand new smooth jazz music coming out this week. Again, we'll put the information in the links below in the description so you can check out this brand new song from Bobby coming up. Bobby, thank you again very much for being with us here on the Record Show today.
And thank you, Jim, for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Time now for a peek at the highlights of this week's new vinyl releases, hopefully headed to an independent record store near you. Kind of a big week with a couple of big titles, one of which may or may not make it out in time, but we'll just have to wait and see. Starting off with the big one, though, it is the remastered reissue, of the 1991 Metallica album, self-titled Metallica, aka the Black Album. This is getting a double 180-gram black vinyl treatment. I guess you could call that colored vinyl to fit with the theme of the album. But it also comes in a 5 LP, 14 CD, 6 DVD box set with a whole host of other goodies thrown into that. But most stores hopefully will get plenty of copies of the regular double LP black vinyl version of Metallica's Black Album. Also hitting this week is a new double live album from those lovable little fuzzballs Gwar called Scumdogs Live. Also this week we can look forward to a reissue of the Digital Underground's Sex Packets. This is coming out on blue vinyl. It's a reissue from 1990 featuring the goodies Humpty Dance and Do What You Like. And speaking of the Digital Underground, there will also be a reissue of This Is an EP release from Digital Underground. But the big one looking forward to is Sex Packets, of course. We're all going to do the Humpty Hump. No, I'm not going to do that dance. Also on the reissue front this week is UFO's 1975 Force It. This is coming out in two versions, a double LP black vinyl and an indie exclusive clear vinyl version of that classic UFO album. There's also a reissue from Professor Longhair called Fess at Home, coming out on colored vinyl as well. This was originally recorded in 1973, and as the title hints at, it was recorded at his home in that year, being reissued on colored vinyl. We can also look forward to a reissue of Judas Priest's Sad Wings of Destiny being put out on double LP, and one from the Hillbilly Moon Explosion. Never heard of this group before, but I guess it's a reissue from 2004 coming out on blue vinyl. And this is something for those of you who like Swiss rockabilly music. Never heard of it, but sounds like it's going to be fun. New one this week from Modest Mouse, the Golden Casket, coming out on double LP, and one which has got some high expectations, and this is a new one from Casey Musgraves. It's called Star-Crossed, and this is, according to our info, coming out on a surprise color variant vinyl, meaning there are 3 different color vinyl versions of this, but you don't know which one you're going to get. They're not going to be labeled on the outside, so hence the surprise color vinyl. Now, with the new Casey Musgraves, we were also told that, at least in our part, some of the warehouses did not get them in time. So getting them for an early Friday release may be a little bit difficult depending on which part of the country you're in. Some of the bigger stores will likely have them. Some of the smaller ones that are a little further away from the warehouse shipping from distributors might not get them until next week or so. So just double check with your local stores to find out whether or not they'll be getting that new Casey Musgraves in time. Ken will hopefully be back next week, and we'll check in with that week's new releases coming up in the next record show. And finally today, in our Spin from the Wasteland, let's hear all about the changed world of Farmer Brown. You see, in addition to providing music for many, many, many decades, vinyl records were also used for a lot of other things, from radio commercials. They were served on them long in the days before satellite or IP delivery, and in this case, educational film strips. Now, this entire film strip and its audio were produced by the Michigan Department of Agriculture and the Dairy Council of Michigan to help educate school children not only about dairy foods, but how they're made and how the various products are used.
The imagination of Michigan's progressive dairy industry has led to all kinds of dairy foods, many of which didn't even exist just a few years ago. These are just a few of the dairy foods you see whenever you go to a grocery store.
Well, I like all kinds of milk, but especially chocolate milk.
Well, what's the difference between chocolate milk and chocolate dairy drink?
Now, the audio provided on vinyl for this film strip is identical on both sides, except one side is just a regular clean version of the narration of the film strip all the way through. But the other side has the actual dings that I'm sure a lot of us remember from the educational film strips, alerting teachers when to switch their slides.
Michigan Dairy Foods and the Changed World of Farmer Brown. Most of our milk today comes from a modern dairy farm like this somewhere in Michigan.
Now, sadly, when this copy of the audio came through the store, it did not come with the original slides for the film strip. But what it did include was a booklet for the teachers describing all of the content and outlining all of the slides. So when we went to put this into Discogs and on YouTube, we just had to scan those in. They're not the color versions that I'm sure the school children saw at the time, but it's almost as good. One of the other really cool things is the snapshot in time, if you will, the 1970s view of what the future of dairy farming may look like, including a slide and narration that talks about the population of Michigan and the nation growing so that dairy farms would have to produce more dairy foods with less land, as shown in this multiple-story dairy barn. And then you can see that the end slide is the future of modern Farmer Brown, with a very, very Jetsons-like farm that he's working from. All in all, this is a cool piece of history to have, especially for those who remember these types of film strips in elementary school.
The world of Farmer Brown has indeed changed to keep up with our space age. It promises to continue the trend toward specialization, to reach out with higher quality living for all of us. The Michigan Dairy Farm, the world of Farmer Brown has changed, is changing, and will continue to change. Watch for these changes and consider how the dairy industry changes your world too.
You spin me right round, baby, right round, like a record, baby, round, 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 round.
Thanks for watching The Record Show. If you haven't done so yet, please make sure to subscribe to the Radio Wasteland Records YouTube channel. And be sure to hit that notifications bell so you'll be alerted every time we upload new content.